Welcome to the Speakeasy. The Speakeasy is a place for unfiltered conversations on faith and justice. At each gathering, we invite a special guest to share their story in conversation around a particular topic or issue related to faith and justice. We hope the Speakeasy inspires empathy, fosters common ground, and cultivates deeper connections in our community and beyond. To learn more about the local church, visit growlocal.church or just come see us one Sunday morning.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the plant for our Speakeasy conversation with Mike Wiley. A gift to have you here. My name is Brent, and I serve as the pastor of the local church, which is a United Methodist faith community here in Chatham County. We meet on Sunday mornings at Woods Charter School currently, but as part of being the local church, we occupy many other spaces throughout the community in an incarnational fashion, and the plant has become one of those home away from homes for us. And so I'm grateful to our friends here for allowing us to take this time and take the space. And thank you for carving out space in your schedules and in your lives for this conversation tonight. Mike Wiley is an actor, a playwright, award-winning, TED Talk giving. We just shared with Catherine.
Small TEDx.
Yeah, don't diminish, don't downplay. And has written quite a number of plays, predominantly telling the stories from African American history. And so, I could go online, I could ask ChatGPT to give me a bio of Mike Wiley, but who is Mike Wiley? You can do that, and it will do it because I have it right here. But, who is Mike Wiley to Mike Wiley?
Well, that's an interesting question to ask a person who in one show might play 36 characters.
Yes.
So who is Mike Wiley to Mike Wiley? I would say above, all of the things that you just mentioned, which are, really great and really, special and things that have come out of the work and passions that I have, but I think that there are folks here that know me well enough to know that I'm a friend and a husband and a dad, and those are the things that are most important to me. Having a laugh with good friends and family, and being close to those people, and being inspired by them. That's who I am. That's who make me who I am. The rest of those things are the benefits of being creative, of always pushing myself, but at the end of the day, I go back home, and home is who I am.
Home is, I think, a journey for many of us. These conversations are intended to, the hope is that we bridge that intersection of faith and justice. And so I want to begin by just asking you about your religious upbringing, if any. What was that like for you? How did home play into that as you grew up as well?
Well, I grew up in the church. That's you find a lot of particularly Southern black people that will say, "I grew up in the church, and that's why I sing today," right? It's like, I grew up in the church, and then there's a whole bunch of narrative, and that's why I sing gospel today. Or, I grew up in the church, and narrative, and then I went from gospel to singing R&B, and that's me, right? You hear a lot of that. And I will say that when I say I grew up going to church, not necessarily in the church. I was in the church choir reluctantly. I was an usher at the church reluctantly, because my mother was, and my grandmother, most of my family, particularly the women in my family. I was raised by mostly women, and the women in my family were very religious. And so I would find myself in church on most Sundays, late to church on most Sundays, I will say. We were balcony folks, so I would find myself late to church. We would find ourselves late to church, which is always extremely embarrassing. But for me, church was storytelling. Church was a time to watch some of the best people watching and some of the best storytelling. And
the people watching when you weren't paying attention to the sermon, just to be clear.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, in earnest, I spent a lot of my time watching the way people observed the pastor or the ushers, listening to the politics of church. And I don't mean the politics of Christ or the politics of the Bible. I mean the politics of Miss Mary made some really terrible potato salad and everybody's talking about it. Those are the politics, right? I listened to those kinds of things. I watched people, catch the spirit in church and wondered what was happening and if that would ever happen to me. I watched my reverend. In fact, my first foray into really becoming a different character was when my 7th grade drama teacher asked me if I would read a Shel Silverstein poem out loud. And when the other kids that were given poems read theirs out loud, they would read them as themselves. They would say, Sarah, Sylvia, Cynthia Stout would not take the garbage out, or hooray, said Ickle Me Pickle Me Too as we went for a ride in a flying shoe, right? The first thing I did when I read this poem called The Unicorn was say, a long time ago, when the earth was green, there were more kinds of animals than you ever seen. They all ran around while the earth was being born, but the loveliest of all was a unicorn. Now, I wasn't being me. I was being Reverend Wright, who was the preacher at my church. He was, he's probably about 300 pounds, over 6 feet. He had no hair here and an afro puff right here. and when I read that to the class and my drama teacher, something awakened in me, but she also saw something. She said, that was wonderful. Man, could you do it for the whole school? And I thought about it for a millisecond, and I thought, that'd kind of be fun. I think I would enjoy becoming someone else, not being myself, but becoming someone else for the whole school. And so I went home and I borrowed my grandmother's church robe, and because I'm ready to be in costume to do this thing, and I'm channeling Reverend Wright to the best of my ability, but I kind of double down on it, right? Now that I got a robe and everything, so I step in front of the school and I don't even start with the poem at first. I go, let the church say amen. Let the church say amen. And the whole school is like, amen, right? Let the church say hallelujah. And they're like, hallelujah. And a long time ago, and I start going into the poem, right? There were humpy bumpy camels and chimpanzees. There were cats and rats and elephants. But sure as you're born, y'all don't hear me. I'm sprinkling all the church stuff in that I know. I mean, I'm going to town on it. Y'all don't hear me. I pull out a handkerchief and everything. But sure as you're born, the loveliest of all was a unicorn. Because he's big, so he's got big jowls, right? And then my grandmother heard about it, and she said, Could you do it for the church? And I'm like, ooh, I don't know if Reverend Wright is going to take too kindly to me popping up there and imitating him, but your grandmother asks you to do something, you kind of you got to do it, right? In for a penny, in for a pound. And so there I was, Sunday morning, this robe on, Reverend Wright sitting about where you're sitting, I'm behind his pulpit, and I go into that whole poem, and this time I not only double down on it, because he does this thing from the pulpit. He doesn't just stand like this, because he's a wide guy and kind of nimble for his size. He would go, right? And sometimes he would lean on the podium. So I'm using everything that I sit in church observing to imitate this man. But the Lord seen some sinning, and it caused him some pain. He said, stand back, look out, I'm gonna make it rain. He said, hey, brother Noah, tell you what you do. Go and build me a floating zoo. Take 2 alligators and a couple of geese. Take 2 humpy-bumpy camels and some chimpanzees. Take 2 cats and rats and elephants. But sure as you're born, no, don't you forget my uniform. And I finished the poem, right? And Reverend Wright walks over, and the church is like, my grandmother's, my mom's, everybody very proud. Reverend Wright walks over and goes, Michael, that was interesting. To this day, the man gives me the stink eye every time I see him. Every time. My mother got remarried a few years ago. She got remarried a few years ago, and I was, my younger brother, and I were groomsmen, right? And Reverend Wright performed the ceremony. I remember walking in, and he looked, we escorted my mom in, and he looks up from the Bible and he goes, but you have to see, that's me. But you have to see that is what gave me those early understandings of what storytelling was. To listen to a sermon on a Sunday and try and find myself in that sermon, to try and take it apart and put it together, and then try and find it either in the Bible or in my mind. And then all those other individuals in church that I took inspiration from, either in the way they talked or in the way they held themselves, or just in the way that they walked through the world. And so I was baptized when I was 10, 11. And I don't know if I was necessarily ready to be baptized, but it was just a thing. The end of Vacation Bible School came, and every year somebody popped up there when the Reverend said, the doors of the church are open. And it was probably at that very young age where I felt an awkwardness in silence, and I was always trying to fill the silence. And he said, the doors of the church are opened, and nobody was going up there. And I thought, maybe I should go up there. But at the end of the day, if it was my time to be baptized, it must have been my time to be baptized. And I continued to go to church up into my teenage years, but now I find that what I remember most, and also what inspires me most and what excites me most when it comes to literally sitting in a pew, it's a choir. it's the lifting of voices.
Multiple, not just one.
Multiple voices, particularly gospel choirs. When I was a kid, there used to be commercials on television. The mighty clouds of joy, right? These are gospel groups and quartets that would play on Sunday mornings. My grandmother would listen to a man that came on the radio named Reverend Ike. And Reverend Ike was probably a snake oil salesman. But as a kid, I was every Sunday morning, because Reverend Ike would come on the radio on Sunday mornings, and he would sell the secret of good luck. If you would like the secret of good luck, send your money to Reverend Ike. My grandmother never sent money to Reverend Ike. My grandmother's an extremely intelligent woman, but she loved listening. She loved stories. Still does. She's 96. She loves all of those things. And again, what I'm trying to help you to understand is these are all the multiple parts that made me. Whether it's the gospel in church, or whether it's my grandmother taking me to church and her influence, or my desire to try to make sense of what I was hearing in church, it's all a part of the person that I have become.
What strikes me from all of the amazingness that you just shared was the ways in particular that these stories become a part of you and then you live them out, you embody them. I think that's my hope as a pastor, is that the stories we share on Sunday mornings will become a part of people such that they will then be able to rehearse and then play as soon as the curtain goes up in the real world, quote unquote. I wonder how that has manifest for you in the plays that you've written, and the characters, the personas that you have embodied. I was with you a few weeks ago at the MLK event at Pittsburgh United Methodist. Kevin Rose is here, who helped put that on. And I think the thing that struck me was the ways that you invited, and I know you do this with all, especially in schools, but you invited young people in particular to embody and take on various roles in the play, such that I would imagine they can have that experience too. And so I just wonder how, there's a question here, but how have those stories informed the writing, the creative process still in Emmett Till, in Jackie Robinson, in the Montgomery bus boycott? Does that make sense? Is that a question? How are those embodied narratives, particularly as it relates to your faith, play out there?
Leaving the faith over here for a moment, the reason that I utilize audience participation are varied, and in some ways it did come out of again the call and response that happens in church, right? That from a very young age, let the church say amen, and realizing that if I said it right, if I said it in just the right way, people would go amen. People would say hallelujah, right? If you ask people in the right way, they are kind of willing to either say or come along with you as a storyteller on the journey. So I did start practicing it at a very young age, really not knowing what I was doing. I mean, right? I think, Catherine was saying just a little bit ago when we were talking that, brain doctor said that men don't develop the frontal lobe until their mid-30s, if they ever do.
That's true. That just happened.
True. That
Yes.
just happened. So I can't say that I have the answers if I ever will. However, it's all an experiment, and
Improv.
it's all improv.
Yeah.
It gets better each time that I do it, but there is a level of understanding that I have when it comes to audiences of all types that I've developed over the course of 23 years of creating characters, but each journey in front of an audience is different every time, and I have to understand and make that agreement. It's an agreement that you all have, that the audience has. The audience comes in and the agreement is, I'm going to take you on a journey, and you will be in trusted hands, and that's the unspoken agreement that we have. A similar agreement to when people walk into a church or into a house of worship. There is an agreement that is unsaid, unspoken, but there is an agreement. And so for me, the audience participation is a part of that. I'm never going to ask an audience member to do something that I myself am not willing to do. That I'm willing to look just as foolish as any one of you all are. Most of the time I don't, but I am willing to look as foolish. And sometimes people will ask, are you a comedian? And I'll say, no. You have to understand that my job is to get out of your way. My job in the audience participatory part, my job is to set it up and let you take care of the punchline. Let you take care of all the laughs. And I just let it happen. Sure, I might give you a few lines or give you some instruction, but everything else, right? Everything else is of your own, is what you do. And there's probably a message in there that is faith-filled as well. The faith that you have in me as an audience member when you were voluntold to do something, the faith you all have in the whole thing transpiring and working itself out in the right way. It's also Shakespearean. I mean, what light through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. Arise, fair sun. And is that interesting, or is this interesting? What light through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. What's more interesting? It's much more interesting when I'm directly talking to you, when I'm involving you, when I bring you into the story, as opposed to, this is a soliloquy and nobody else is involved. There's no fun in that. I think that sorry. So many beans for lunch. Really. I'm so silly. So I had, it's Dave Yell. I had wings at his house last night. Blame you for these digestive issues. No, it really is about creating what I've only recently heard sociologists, apparently there's a whole, but I've just been doing it in my acting, but it's creating a brave space, right? It's creating a space where people feel open and people feel willing, people feel sharing, and people feel together. And I do that with every performance, in the way you do that in creating this or in a house of worship. It's the kind of thing that we should all be doing, right? We should be doing it in our workspaces. We should be doing it in our clubs, in our in our schools, we should be creating these brave spaces.
Which are different from safe spaces.
Correct. Because we want people to be bold. We want people to feel brave enough to speak from the heart, but also feel safe in being able to do that. And I think by asking people, without really asking people, to portray Rosa Parks or some of the characters in Jackie Robinson or some of the characters in One Noble Journey. One Noble Journey is my play about Henry Box Brown, who was an enslaved man who mailed himself to freedom. But I'm asking audience members to become enslaved people at times. And whether I'm literally bringing someone on stage to do that or just addressing the audience as if they are, for instance, in The Fire of Freedom about Abraham Galloway, as if they are a room full of former enslaved people that have recently escaped and are making the decision to either continue their escape into the North or stay in the South to fight with the Union Army. The idea is that in making that decision, again, that agreement to be in the room, then perhaps you are also making the agreement in some small way to understand what that lived experience is, to, in a small way, walk a mile in someone else's shoes that is not the same gender as you, it's not the same race as you, it's not the same caste as you. I'm asking you all to do that, and somehow it works. I don't know.
Well, it makes me think of something I think about, one of the stories in the Bible that I think about a lot, which is the dry bones passage in Ezekiel. When you talk about creating space and then getting out of the way, right? There's this moment where, Ezekiel is surrounded by these dry, ossified bones, symbolizing just pure death. And God speaks and says, prophesy to these bones, Ezekiel. Prophesy. God doesn't say, somebody should prophesy to these bones. And just kind of sit back and wait for somebody to do. God says, you. God creates that space, right? For Ezekiel to actually prophesy. That's when the Spirit enters and the bones come to life again. And I saw that happen, and I've seen that happen again and again, especially that night, watching those that you invited into that space, and gave them that brave space to take that risk, right?
Well, so a few years ago, more than a few years ago, probably over 15 years ago, I was performing that play, One Noble Journey, outside of Charleston. And a woman came up to me after the performance. This little old black lady came up to me after the performance, and she said something to the effect of, "Mr. Wiley, your gospel, your preaching, and she kept calling what I did, she kept putting it in religious context, and it was much younger then, and I will say that in my mind, I wanted to correct her because I didn't see it as any of those things yet, and it took, I would say, a few years later when I was listening to a sermon by Vernon Tyson, Tim Tyson's father, from the book Blood Inside My Name. And here he was in this church in Fayetteville, and Vernon Tyson was easily 6'1", 6'2", wide fella, and he was constantly getting requests from all black churches to preach. And at one point in his sermon at this black church in Fayetteville, because it was my first time hearing him preach, particularly in an all-black church. So I thought, how is this going to go? How is he, not that white folks can't preach to an all-black church. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying there's a little bit of, there's some spices that y'all might leave out.
Sounds terrifying.
You saw my man, the accountant, at the performance the other night. So I was really curious as to how this was going to go down, and he rolled into his sermon, not a few minutes into it, Deacon on the front row, lay it down, Tyson. Oh man! And I thought, he done hooked him. It was. I mean, I was mesmerized, and afterwards we had a conversation. And it wasn't so much about what he had just done; it was about preaching and ministry. Because that was the word that really, when the woman was speaking to me in Charleston, that was the word that really made me go, ministry? Oof, you laying too much on me, lady. I'm 20-something. I don't ministry. I can't lead anybody in ministry. But then listening to Reverend Tyson, and he said, ministry is giving people what they want to hear while simultaneously feeding them what they need to hear.
And I gotta write that down.
And it dawned on me that that's the work of the plays, right? That's the work of One Noble Journey, or Tired Souls, or Leaving Eden. That's the work. The work is sprinkling that sugar in there so people get the giggling and they get the laughing and they get to see, for instance, there's a moment in my play, Breach of Peace, where Martin Luther King is speaking to the Freedom Riders in Montgomery, Alabama. They've just come from being beaten all over that city, all over that downtown area. So they're bloody and they're bruised, and they have to make a decision. And these are mostly students at this point. These are SNCC students from Shaw University, from Fisk University. These are young black students who literally wrote their wills before they traveled down into the Deep South. And here they have to make a decision, and they're looking towards the leadership of these older men in the room. And those older men were Martin Luther King, were Jim Farmer, forgive me, those are the two gents that you should know definitely were in the room. And so they're looking to them for guidance. But they also know, as many of our young people know, that they've got to make decisions internally. That generationally, there is certainly a stagnant generation often ahead of us, right? A generation that did wonderful things and made moves, but then became stagnant. And so they themselves, these SNCC students, these teenagers, right? John Lewis was 21, sitting in this room, figuring out whether they need to continue on into Mississippi, which was the deadliest state for them to go to. And so they're looking to leadership, these leaders, to say whether they should or shouldn't. And so Dr. King stands up and he says, and what I do is I bring someone from the audience to play this role, and often, more often than not, I bring a young black woman up on stage. She doesn't, it's outside of knowing that, there's no other planning involved. So I bring a young black woman up on the stage and I ask her to repeat after me. It's a matter of conscience and morality. We must use our lives and our bodies to right a wrong. And then I have myself say, does that mean, Dr. King, that you will board the Freedom Rides and come with us to Mississippi? And it's kind of 50-50 because I leave that pregnant pause out there, right? To see what the student thinks Dr. King or the young person thinks Dr. King would say. Sometimes it's a person that says, oh no, I ain't going nowhere. More often than not though, somebody says, yes, I will. Because that's what we've been taught about Dr. King. We've been taught almost in a way that is disrespectful to him being a human being.
Deifying.
Right. We deified this man. We've Santa Claused him in a way. He was a human being that could be scared and killed, as we know. And so in that moment when the person says, yes, I go, and they go, no? And then I give them the rest of the lines, and the rest of the lines are, I'm on probation from other arrests, which is what he said. I'm on probation from other arrests. And then the student says, well, we're all on probation, Dr. King, because a lot of them were. I'm on probation. They are on probation. And the students were really crushed by that. Were really saddened that he was not willing to go on that journey. Now here's the thing. Jim Farmer was, and then I go into a monologue about Jim Farmer wanting to do it, right? And so it lets the audience sit with that. They sit with the humanity of King for at least 5 minutes. But then I become John Lewis again. A lot of characters in my head. Then I become John Lewis again, and I say, Dr. King felt terrible about having to say no. He never wanted anyone to do what he himself was not willing. Surely he would have been killed riding in the Mississippi. What would that mean to the movement? 4 or 5 years earlier, his decision might have been different. But now, his position had grown so large. His every word, his every step had to be measured for its impact. And that is a great burden for any man. So it lets him off the hook in that moment, but the audience gets to see for just that moment, oh, he was human. Mm-hmm. He was scared. And damn it, he absolutely would have been killed if he had ridden into Mississippi. I don't even remember what your question was, but...
It doesn't matter, yeah.
But I think it's important to feel that kind of humanity.
You mentioned the number of characters that are in your head all the time. That sounds awful.
Some people get locked up for it. I have skirted the system.
I wonder if there is one or two that have had, may I be so bold as to say the biggest impact or the most impact in a way that changed you or challenged you?
Yeah, there were several actually. I mean, I think, each one of my plays, there is some character that sits with me and stays with me forever. And sometimes that comes in the writing of it. Sometimes that comes in the rehearsing and creating of the characters. Sometimes that comes somewhere down the road in an enlightened moment of portraying that particular character. You know, the first play I wrote was One Noble Journey. I wrote that in '99, and I wrote it for a number of reasons. A, I wanted to employ myself. I didn't want to wait for somebody to give me a job or give me the opportunity to do what I love to do. B, I wanted to be a supplement to what school teachers were already teaching in class about slavery and the making of America. 3, I thought, and this was a real pipe dream now that I look back on it, I thought, if I'm doing my own plays, then I'll have the freedom to audition for movies and film and blah, blah, blah. I cannot do that. I don't have the time to do that.
That's why I don't either.
You and me both. We're simpatico in that way. You just, you know, it's
same.
So, in the writing of that play, one particular night, and I remember this like it was yesterday. I was living in the Bronx, and I was traveling back and forth to Virginia. It's pre-internet, so I was traveling back and forth to the State Library in Virginia to pick up, to do research on slavery in Virginia, but most importantly, to read and take notes from, because I couldn't check the book out, the narrative of the life of Henry Box Brown. And so I would come down on weekends and I would go back to New York for the weekdays. And one Sunday night after a journey down, I was sitting there in my apartment, or my aunt's apartment that I was staying in, and writing out the scene in One Noble Journey where Henry Box Brown's wife and children are sold away from him. And I just started weeping. I couldn't stop weeping when I finished the scene. When I finished writing the scene, I just was a mess. And it dawned on me that that was the key to telling this story. The key to telling this story, not necessarily the story of Henry Box Brown, but the story of American chattel slavery, was the constant separation and fear of separation of families. There's no race. If I tell you all that I'm going to separate you from your wife forever, you from your kids forever, you from your mother, your father, your friends forever, forever, there is something that happens in your heart. Now imagine if not only I tell you that, I bring you on stage to be my wife, and I walk you around, and we go through the lines of being sold over and over and over again. And then I get to that moment where it's the last time that she is sold, because she and the children are sold, because they are now going to be sold to a place that is far from Henry being able to ever see them again. And so here we are on the road for the very last time. And I say, there's my papa. I knew he'd come. At this point in the play, you all have watched this woman, whoever I bring up, you've watched this woman walk around with me. Often it's a white woman. You've watched this woman walk around with me. And I say, and then came my wife, chained. And Henry had a lot of faith. So he said, God, spare me from seeing such horrors again. I took her hand intending to say goodbye. But the words left me like the last breath before drowning. And I use that analogy there, or that metaphor, because we've all at some point felt a gasp. We've all at some point felt short of breath. We've all at some point felt like, I just can't kind of catch my, and then you can imagine what it feels like to maybe almost drown. And so then I say, I walked her some distance down the road till in agony I had to turn away, but I just couldn't speak. The audience has watched this entire thing transpire. And now they feel for a moment, for just in a small way, what it might be like to be not not just in Henry's shoes, but in all of those enslaved people that were separated over and over and over again. You feel for a moment what it feels like to be them. I'm emotional right now just thinking about it, knowing that there are people in this world that I am related to, but I will never know that because of the constant separation. So many folk can say, yes, my family goes back to Ireland, and then we were also in the and Welsh and all of those things. So many Black Americans can only say a part of their story because of that constant separation. And I realized when I finished that scene that night in 1999 in July, right before Sex and the City came on Sunday nights, I realized that this was the linchpin. This is what was going to help people understand this story. Because you can take a whipping or a beating any day and you will heal. Eventually you will heal. But matters of the heart never heal. And that's what I wanted to impress upon people in that moment. And that's why I shed so many tears that night, because I then felt myself suddenly in the world of Henry Brown. And I thought about the loss. And I thought about the loss of my own family, people that I have lost along the way. And here he was losing his family through terrorism, through the villainy and the tyranny of chattel slavery. So that was a moment for me. Another moment was describing Emmett Till's body in the way that Mamie Till describes his body the first time she has to look at it after it's been sent from Mississippi. This is the first time she's ever seen her son since the day that he kissed her on the cheek and got on that train to go down to Mississippi. This is the first time she's seeing his mutilated body. And so as an actor embodying Mamie Till, I have to describe this body for the audience. And the first couple of years of moving through that, yes, the audience would be emotional. I was in touch with my feelings, but nothing like after I had my own sons. It completely transformed the way that I portray that role and that moment, because then as an actor, what we are supposed to do is take the personalizations from your own life and couple them with the character that you are portraying, and that's how we humanize, in a sense, the characters that we portray. And in embodying Mamie Till, I would take personalizations and put them together with her descriptions, and then give this 10-minute monologue describing his body. But then after I had sons, it hit me in the center in a way that performing it had never done before, because now I could imagine my own sons.
It's not just Emmett Till.
It's not just Emmett Till. And again, because of the direct address, because I speak directly to the audience, people see their own children. People imagine their own children, regardless of your race. People see their own children in that coffin. And as an actor, I look out and I see that emotion. I see how people feel when I'm describing it. So there was another time that I carry each time that I portray that role, and it continues with each and every, with all of the plays that I have, even some of the plays that I've written as ensemble pieces, that I'm not in, I still feel in some way internally as the character. I have to. I have to. Sorry, that was a really long answer to your question. But I have really long answers to everything. So,
I've got one more question. So much of your work has been rooted in history. When you look at the stories that need to be told today in the world around us now, what breaks your heart and what gives you hope?
It breaks my heart that we are only scratching the surface of the multitude of stories and contributions Black Americans have made, and the stories that still go untold, the individuals that have not been, whose stories have not been lifted, that are either undertold or quieted. You know, we're just scratching the surface there, and at the same time, in just scratching the surface, there are organizations and individuals that want to ban those stories, that want to quiet those stories even more. The stories that we already know. The truths, the facts that we already know. There are organizations and individuals that want to quiet those, tamp those down, or do away with them altogether.
As if that rids them of the truth.
Right, as if that absolves
maybe it never
them in some way.
Happened, yes.
Right? And it does not. Or it absolves the individuals that took part in some of these atrocities, and some of them aren't atrocities. Some of those really wonderful things. Yet still, that people are looking for ways to quiet that and or mute those things, or again destroy them altogether. So that is, every time. Every time something comes out of Florida, a friend of mine texts me and goes, "Brother, you ain't never gonna be jobless," which is true. It's just sad because there are so many stories to be told, and Florida is one of those states that is doing its best to quiet those stories and
keep you in business.
Texas and. So yeah, I'm just going to be employed in those kinds of job security. That's just sad.
Oh man,
it's frightening. But what gives me hope is that remember when I said that it's friends that are most important to me. That you asked me who Mike Wiley was, and I said friends. And family, and children, my children, right? So what gives me hope is friends like Corinda Roebuck, the work that she does in this community, the work that Karen Howard does in this community. I look around and I look out. That's the stuff that I'm. In some ways, my dentist described to me the other day.
Sure, yeah.
No. Wait. Follow me here. My dentist said to me the other day, because we were talking about basketball, and I'm reluctantly assistant basketball coaching my younger son's rec team. I'm terrible. I know nothing about rules. But he said something that made sense to me, and he said, dribbling, right? Sometimes
not this kind, just to be clear.
Not this kind. Uh-huh. Dribbling, right? Ball handling skills. When a player does a lot of that, and it works, it's working because the fans, the other players, it's almost like their minds go, look at that cool dribbling. Oh, that dude is really good. Oh, that young lady is really good. While the other players on offense are moving into position to be able to make the right play, the proper play, the strong play that gets the point, right? And if that means that I am dribbling, then Corinda and Karen and anyone else in this room that is working towards social justice, right? You're moving into the right positions so that you all can make the play and get the points. I'm just the magician going, look over here. Look over here. They're doing the real work, the real scoring, the yeoman kind of work. I am simply taking the attention over here so that they can do the work as hard and as properly and as often as they possibly can. That's what gives me hope, is those folks that are doing it on the ground. I go into communities and to go into schools, and I'm there for a day or two or three or an hour. And I'm not saying that what I do isn't important, but I'm saying it's the people that are there day in and day out. It's the people that are having meetings, that are extending olive branches, that are standing truly on the front lines. They give me hope to continue to do what I do. That's why I meant follow me with the dribbling, follow me with the basketball. You got me.
Mike, thank you so much for being with us
You're welcome.
tonight.